Good morning, everybody. Let's just see if I can. Yes, there we go. First slide. It's working. That's good. So my name is Karen Reynolds. I'm the manager of the Interactive Studies Unit based at the University of Birmingham, and I'm also a member of the ASPiH Executive Committee. And this is my colleague Grace.
I'm Grace Gephardt, and I'm the Director of Simulation Education at Arkansas Children's Hospital in Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, in the United States. And I also am past president of the other ASPiH, the Association for Standardized Patient Educators.
Okay, so we are giving this presentation on behalf of that other ASPiH, which is an organisation that I'm also a member of and have been involved with on executive level in the past. So I'm just going to say from the outset, we actually did put this together as a workshop, and it is now a short communication. So some of the interactive side of it, we're not going to quite be able to do that today, I'm afraid, because we just don't have the time. So as much as we would like to get the feedback from you, we're just going to have to keep pushing through. Otherwise, Ben's going to get very cross with me over there because I'll be running out of time. So I'm just going to give you a little overview of what our plan for this session really is. We're both obviously working in simulation. I work predominantly with simulated patients or standardized patients. Grace works with those, but she also does work with other modalities in simulation too. And really, we're very aware that in simulation centres here in the UK and around the world, it's often the case where people are brought in at the last minute to play a role or to do something that perhaps is outside of their job description or comfort levels. So whilst I would always say and stress that the preferred, the first route really should be a professional role player or simulated patient, we do recognise that at times it's not possible, and somebody else in the team is often hauled in to do that role. So what we really wanted to do was give a few tips on things to remember if that happens to your simulation. So we really hope that you might, if this isn't something you're familiar with, if perhaps you don't normally role play or act as an SP, that you will have a few tips to take away to remember if you need to be one at the last minute. Okay. So some key terms, I'm not going to read them out. I'm sure you're all aware of SPs. And just to remind you about the standards of best practice that ASPiH published recently, and I think everyone has copies of them in your conference bag, so I'll just leave that there. So the ASPiH standards are organised into 5 domains. They're listed there. The domain that we're going to be focusing on today is SP training. So SP training is really important. I think we're all aware that it is a professional role. It's not something that should be done on the hoof, really. SPs are trained specifically, not just to portray the role, but also in their feedback. And I think that's the key thing. A lot of people, of course, can portray a patient or a participant, but the evidence-based feedback that is needed as part of the learning is something really that needs quite a bit of training to back it up. We're not going to touch on assessment today because that is another kettle of fish, and I absolutely would not recommend anybody using untrained SPs for assessment. So, ASPiH standards of best practice state that sending SPs into learning experiences without adequate training can compromise both the effectiveness of the learning objectives and the safety of everyone involved. These are the values that underpin the standards, and I think everybody will hold these values dear to them anyway in whatever modality you're working in. It isn't just with SPs. So this is a scenario that those of us working with SPs sometimes get. Somebody walks into our office or our phone goes and asks us to recruit some SPs for a sim session that's happening tomorrow using a case that hasn't been tried before. Has anybody in the audience had that happen? Yes, you have. I might pick on you if that's okay. How did that go? Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And definitely, of course, there are people out there with the skills, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to recruit SPs. But there are lots of people out there who can't do it. And also, what we don't know is, when we pick somebody off the hoof like that, is what's going on in their real life. Is this a particularly traumatic scenario for them? You know, perhaps if it's a bereavement scenario and they've recently had a bereavement in their family. These are things that we wouldn't necessarily know when we're bringing them in to do this, and they are things that are important to remember. Can you think of any other issues, perhaps, that might be problematic in this scenario? Do you want to add anything, Grace?
If no one else will. It goes back to safety, I think. And the other thing, and actually we were talking about this at breakfast, that so often if someone is put in at the last minute, what they really portray is more of a caricature of that role, because there's a bit of discomfort in it if you don't have something to pin your portrayal on. One of the things I think, having said that you can do to try to mitigate the challenge is to make sure that the person that does volunteer at the last minute to portray, that they understand what the objectives are, what the goals are for why they're in that scenario, why they are needed, so that they don't just become a prop necessarily. And also that they understand if there are specific things that they need to say or do during the simulation to help move those objectives forward, so that they can feel like they're making a contribution. They really are part of the teaching or training process, of course. And then if the request is also that they're going to give feedback during the debriefing, I have to say I first would steer the requester away from that, unless there happens to be someone who's been trained in how to do that appropriately, because you can open whole cans of worms that you hadn't planned on doing, and really things can kind of run amok at that point. So, but those would be the three things that I would be looking for in someone if at the last minute. And I've had faculty come literally in the middle of a simulation in our building and say, hey, can you come be the mom? Because I work at a pediatric facility. And I can. I actually was sitting at my desk doing administrative work, and I'm happy to take a break from that. But you're not going to get the best product, even though I'm steeped in this methodology. And so I think the other piece of it really is being able to comfortably say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. Which sometimes is a little bit awkward, but in terms of if we go back to really simulation being a safe learning and training environment, sometimes we have to stand on that and say, let's plan for this next time, and let's plan a little further